And I always imagine that Mr. Beethoven is emulating an accordion at that moment. Anyhow, we're back. vk3sl test missions on 160 and on UHF. And I'm hoping we have a slightly better system running today because, unbeknown to me, the SPL 3220, the Eurocom Behringer unit, which I use to sort of bolster the signal here, I've got a sort of an array of processing here to give a bit of punch, and there's an Innovonics 222 as well, and they both run in tandem. And so yeah, that's the approach. But the Eurocom was out of action, so it must have still played through even if the thing's unplugged. But I inadvertently knocked the plug out, and that may have happened some time ago. So interesting. You discover things all the time. The air gap, indeed. That's right.
Good afternoon.
And hello to you, Frank. Yes, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, and Frank number 1 or 2 or both.
This is VK3JR.
I won't provide a.
VK3AP. Afternoon, Frank.
Yeah,
Hey, Frank.
it's good. I won't make a triage. You're both equal partners in this venture.
Your audio is sounding very smooth.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm pleased this Eurorack is back in action. I think it's been out for some time. Interesting. All right. Well, I haven't. That means the levels on UHF may be a bit. I don't know. They may need to be checked, I suppose. But how are things coming through?
Sounds fine at the moment. So.
Okay. All right.
Yes, it does.
That's nice to know. All right. Well, yeah. There's not a lot to report really. We're just busy at the home station here doing reports, and I've got to spend a fair bit of the program today at the coalface, but I will be in the room, and we'll certainly fill up the gap. And it's been freezing cold, hasn't it? It's just
Certainly has. I haven't felt warm all day.
no.
Snowing.
It's like that. It's incredible. What a change after those mild days, and suddenly we're just in the midst of this incredible cold snap, and I just can't. I'm cold to the core, and I've got the radiator in here, and I'm trying to wrap my feet around it and poke my toes in between the little vents on it, and I still can't keep warm. Even put on my bamboo
me putting
socks.
all my ski gear together.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. It's the ski season's all up. And
Well, it starts this weekend.
that's what that's right. And they're anticipating sort of a month's worth of snow in a few days or something.
A few of the forecasts are anything up to, depending on where you are, 80, 90 centimetres of snow on some of the places over the next week or so.
That's incredible. Amazing. Yeah. Oh, well, that'd be nice. It'd be nice. I love being up in the snow where it's so quiet. It's the quiet. It's the most amazing thing. And that's just that stillness. Yeah. Anyhow, so you planning to do a bit of skiing? Are you?
Yeah, I'm quite an avid skier. I have a big trip already booked in. I tend to buy season passes each year, and
Yep.
so last year was a big hit. There was no season and couldn't do it.
Yeah,
And,
sure.
So hoping to possibly get up for the weekend. That'll all depend on what happens, of course, Thursday, whether we
Yeah.
get released or not.
I
How,
know.
we'll see.
That's it.
But certainly a bit later in the season, I've got a bigger trip booked, and outside of that, I'll play opportunist with good conditions and availability of accommodation, and I just head up and tend to do a fair bit. So
Oh, good on you, Frank.
I instructed up there part time years ago, and
Did you?
so I enjoy the environment, and a lot of friends up there. And like you, I love the silence, particularly you ski along when it is snowing. If it's not windy, it's quite amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
All you can hear is a bit of the crunching of the skis on the snow, and it's just this silence. It is quite amazing.
It is amazing. I've done a bit of snow camping in the past, and I just relish in that that solitude. It's quite a beautiful experience. But it's interesting to hear. I didn't realise you were so involved. Well, I wish you well. I hope you get up there this weekend, and looks like we probably will be out of the woods on Thursday. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. And
it'll depend whether they do try to segregate rural or regional.
That's still
metro.
possible.
That's the possibility. They might limit travel that way. Who knows?
That's it. Kate was planning to go to Sydney with our second youngest, young William, and whenever the kids turn 12, she takes them up for a weekend to Sydney on the long weekend. She's done it with all of the children, and she stays with a friend there, and then sort of looks at the sights of the town. But the city, but I don't think that's, well, who knows what will happen, but I have a feeling that borders
So
won't be open.
does that mean it happens when they turn 12, 24, 36, 48 as well, or?
I don't know about that, but no, it's sort of a coming of age thing. My coming of age thing is when they turn 7. I do I used to do the 5-day walk around Wilson's Prom, and stay at the light station on day 3. So that was my sort of coming of age.
That'd be pretty cool. It's nice part of the world down there.
Yeah, it's lovely. That's a beautiful walk, and with young kids you can do it over 5 days and just sort of pace yourself. And there's a couple of big climbs, but as long as you sort of contextualise it a bit, they manage.
I guess if you've left yourself plenty of time, though, that you're not trying to do it in 2 or 3, that you've got enough time to do it. You
exactly.
can almost take the majority of the day to go up a big climb or something.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And the allure, of course, was staying at the light station on day 3, and I mean, it's a fantastic setting. It's just so spectacular, and you've got Bass Strait out in front of you, and it's you have the luxury of staying in the cabins there. But they unfortunately notched the price up from $50 a night per person to $160 per person per night. So
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was really
it's a
unfortunate.
bit rude, isn't it?
Yeah, they did it overnight, and it was
How can they justify that? That's over a 3-fold pricing increase.
Yeah,
They
it
have
was.
to justify it.
They don't, and it was all about catering for the helicopter brigade, the eco or the tourists who come in, luxury tourists who come in and sort of spend the night there under luxury, pretense.
Such a shame, because it changes the whole character of the
certainly,
idea,
it does. It killed the whole idea for us, because it ended up, the last time we went, it cost us nearly $1,000 to stay one night. I'd be happy.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just crazy, and I'd be very happy just to stay in the tent. Wouldn't worry me in the least. But the allure is for the children to have that experience of being in that light station precinct.
Wonderful.
Which is so spectacular. It's just the most beautiful, beautiful spot. And we sort of gear it up so we get there around lunchtime, leave at 5 a.m. for the walk before that day, and then not leave until lunchtime the next day. So it's 2 sort of shortish walks each side of it. So you get the maximum, you get a good 24 hours almost there. So that was the sort of the plan, and it was really good. But when I remember speaking to the ranger, and he was almost in tears, and he said, "Look, my idea is this is for people like you and families," and but it was a decision made in other places further upstream.
A certain department, I imagine. And
yep, absolutely. Yeah, so looking at the big dollar, and sort of killed it for families who want to sort of take this type of initiative. But look, we got there. We got all of them except for Celia, my youngest, who's now 12. No, she's now 11. So so she'll we'll have to do something else with her. So all the others have had the experience. Henry's done it about 8 times, and
was it a decision taken by the local council?
Yeah, I think the problem is the light station.
Because it's a national park, it'd come under parks, wouldn't it?
No,
you're right, Frank.
I think it doesn't, because the light station is under the light. There's another.
Is it a maritime?
Yes, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
So there was some sort of lease arrangement, and it was complicated. It wasn't something that could be.
They would still, I imagine, though, would have to be they would have to work with parks, because whilst there's a lease, but it's still within a national park, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, look, I think the parks did have some say, but I think there's huge pressures on everyone these days to toe the line and to offer some sort of added value add to any eco environment. And unfortunately, people who do it on the cheap, the first two, sort of get marginalised.
The vast majority of the population.
Yeah, well, sadly, it's the.
Well, you can see it too. I'm not really across everything that's happening, but there's some talk of, the development on some of the Tasmanian sites that are cherished by walkers and World Heritage, and they're looking at making them very, more what they call ecotourism, but that means building facilities and really taking them away from what they are. Yeah,
I agree. I've heard that too. I think some of the iconic walks in southwest Tas, I'm just pleased I did them when I was young, and I don't have to. Well, sadly, I would love to do them with my kids, but if they become sort of international style, high end. I mean, look, even the three Capes walk costs you $1,000 to do it over three or 4 days now.
And that's just for bushwalking. I mean, that's
I know.
just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just crazy stuff. And
The whole point is you're carrying everything you need on your back, and
That's it.
okay, once in a while in a cabin for a bit and with some niceties, great, but that's not the idea.
No, it's not the idea of the bean counters, unfortunately, and we're seeing a real move in that direction. I think New Zealand went down that path some time ago, and it's a high-stakes, big money situation too.
Yeah, there are others. Like I know a young woman who I know sort of through skiing, her family, and she basically packed up the whole full-time employer study thing, and it was 2-3 years ago, she went over and did the entire AT, the Alpine track in New Zealand.
Oh, really?
The thousands of kilometres, like north or south or whichever.
Okay.
Originally went over there on her own, but then, en route, sort of hooked up with other people similar age or went, and so spent many sections walking together with other people.
Yeah.
And I think she did that on a fair shoestring, and so you're still able to do things like that over there. But
that's good. That's nice to hear.
She really enjoyed it. I mean, it was challenging. It was tough at times, but she really enjoyed it.
Yeah, wow. That's
Great
really
adventure, really.
Yeah, it would be. It would be an incredible adventure. It'd be wonderful. Yeah, well, that's it. I think you just have to find a place that's not too micromanaged and contained and repackaged, and I mean, you can do things like walk in the Grampians for days on end, I think, without having to acquiesce. And there are other. I mean,
Grampians are a fabulous spot.
Yeah,
and look, even in the Alps here, if you head up to, obviously not in the winter season because it can get very difficult, particularly with little ones. But during a summer season, the Great Alpine region, the Alpine walking trail and stuff. I mean, you can walk from down in Gippsland right through to Kosciuszko.
Oh, that's where it all started for me, Frank. I did that walk in 1998.
Wow!
And walked all the way to Canberra. We walked 800 kilometres.
My God.
And that was we had the space.
Did you organise food drops?
Yeah, we had 7 food drops, and we had 13 people walk with us at different times. And we'd already done the first bit, so we started at Hotham and did it as a continuum without stopping. But we did a week-long extension in the Jagunga Wilderness around Lake Cancoban, because there's a really special area around there. It's magnificent country, stands of black sallies and just some really remote country we wanted to see. And so we did a week extra around there while we're up on the main range. And it took us exactly 2 months. It was a huge adventure, and then that changed our lives because we just did a whole stack of walks after that. Did about 4,000 kilometre walks. So that was it was a big. We took 2.5 years off and just walked essentially and studied and did other things.
Was that your version of Forrest Gump?
Yeah, well, sort of was. Yeah, we sort of got into our early 30s and we just got a bit sick of everything, and we didn't have any commitments, didn't have any family then, and. So we just sort of thought, we'll throw in the towel, and we had a little flat in Melbourne which we rented out and gave us $80 a week, and we lived off that for 2.5 years.
That's great.
Yep.
So lived out of your backpack essentially.
Yeah, we did, and we spent a lot of time in Prague, and then we did a 3-month walk along the Karpaty range, and then we sort of came back to Australia a couple of times and did extended walks. And the last one we did was the Larapinta Trail before it became commercial again. Became commercialised. And that was a 3-week walk, and that's when poor Kate started to really struggle on that walk, and we were wondering what was wrong. And we hitchhiked. We got to the end, but she was really struggling. We got hitchhiked back into Alice Springs, and she took a test, and she was about 12 weeks pregnant with Henry.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what it was.
Yes, and that was the end of it all, because we went on to Arnhem Land, and we did another couple of long, sort of moderate walks, and stayed with some friends in Gove for a few months. And but we had to really tone it down because she was sort of going through the stages of first trimester. But that was the end of it. We haven't really done anything like that since. then we had 5 kids in close succession.
It'd be very difficult to do it. I mean, your timing was perfect.
We're very lucky that everything sort of dovetailed, and we're very lucky to come back and find jobs and things. And but it was an interesting episode. But the long walks changed my life. It was like it was the most important thing besides having a family I've ever done, because it just changes the perspective on everything. You got that illusion of being self-reliant. You really tune into nature. You listen a lot more. You appreciate silence a lot more. You work through things in your own mind. It's very cathartic, and also intensely troubling at times on another level. So, there's a yin and yang to these types of experiences.
Yeah, I think even your physical well-being too, because you're out moving, a lot of every day, and not necessarily, like high intensity, but just walking and.
Yeah.
But as you say, it's just that connection to nature and
It
your
is.
environment. You start to become much more aware of.
You do.
Yeah,
You do. You become really tuned in, and it's priceless. I've never felt more complete, emotionally and physically than I have at times. And I've also, as I said, there are other times where there was one walk we did. We did the Bilberman track, which is a 1,000-kilometre walk between Perth and Albany, and that's a really claustrophobic walk. And we followed the wildflower season and took hundreds of slides and really studied the flora. And yeah, I mean but it was a very claustrophobic walk, and psychologically it was really hard because you're not seeing horizons and you're just walking through thick forest for 2 months, and I found that really. At times I felt like I was going crazy.
Yeah, you'd have no way of getting out of it.
No, you sort of and yeah, that was a really mentally. I found that more challenging than anything I've done really, but at the end it passed. The depression or the whatever it was passed, and there are moments of elation as well. And we did other walks after that too. So it's an interesting one. You really discover a lot. I mean, it is intensely a navel-gazing episode because you are sort of in your own zone, and it's not you're not sort of that socially mobilised, and it's a very indulgent thing to do. And I think humanity is much better off for being connected interpersonally in some way. So it's sort of artificial on one level, but as a point of catharsis and sort of
But it's probably also. It harks back to something perhaps deep within us from a time when we were a lot more nomadic and, and insular, like small parties or small communities of hunter-gatherers, but, there would have been times when we spent long periods of time on our own or in very small groups.
Yes, that's true, Frank. I'm sure it's true. And also just the experience of tuning in a really sort of, in a way where you lose a lot of your sense of time and you just become very aware, but not sort of consciously aware, but just in the nature zone, in the sound world, in the feeling world there's I don't know, it's something really special, and it's something I hold so close to me, and is that feeling of your feelings, your senses become sort of really really alive.
Yeah.
It's profound, really. It's something I just value enormously, because I think our senses become nulled and dulled and fatigued and
particularly
stressed.
in town, I think, with all of the artificial light and the noise and the inputs, and
that's it.
That's why I love going up to the Alps in winter skiing and even the other stuff I do, some of the photography, because I find the same when I'm up there.
Yes.
You do feel a lot more alive and just aware of stuff. I mean, I don't have to ski all day every day. There'll be times when I'll peel off runs, and I do a bit of backcountry stuff as well, so I can get away from.
That'd be wonderful.
And there are times when I'll peel off the side or out the side country somewhere, and I'll just go and sit there for a few hours on a big rock and just look out over the valley and the.
Oh, it's magic.
All of a sudden you start hearing all of the bird life and the movement in amongst and it, that's just. Yeah. It's an amazing experience to just get away from the noise and people and sit there and do that.
Yes, that's priceless. That's wonderful to hear. Look, I can really relate to what you're saying. It's something, it's an existential sort of experience, really, I think. And I think that all humanity have it in them to be really sensitised in a very profound way to their environment. But
living in towns doesn't allow it to blossom, does it?
No, you're right. I think it's
interesting the effect it has on people too. So when you were walking the Alpine track that year here, we went across. So my partner and I and two other work colleagues, we did the Canning Stock route.
Oh, really?
Wow!
And
it was interesting after a few nights being out there, where it was just so silent. Once your vehicles are stopped, you've made camp for the night.
Yes.
Dinner's squared away, and you're just sitting around quietly. And my partner, it was interesting, she was struggling a little bit because it was so quiet. The few nights she didn't sleep well, and just the absence of that hum or that din of, our society. took her a little while to get used to. I didn't mind it, but it was very, very silent. You know, probably the most silent I've ever heard, because you're just so far removed from anything.
Yeah.
Quite an experience.
I can imagine.
And the skies just, because you're so far from any light source, that the night skies up there are just astonishing.
I imagine it would be. I imagine it'd be something just out of the, like a magic land.
The first 16 years of my life, I lived in South Melbourne, very noisy environment in a small house, and then we moved to North Box Hill, and it was so silent. It took me ages to get used to it. I lay awake at night listening for the noises that I'd been used to.
Wow, because the inner city would have had all of its peculiarities and noises and rhythms, I suppose.
All of that, yes.
Yeah, the railway.
And it was light industrial, so even factory
that's
noises.
Yes, they would have all been in the fray, and then moving out to Box Hill, it would have been I imagine this would have been in the 50s.
We moved in 1960.
60, yeah, right. So Box Hill would have been really quite sort of an outer suburb at that time.
It had been orchard country not long before.
Yeah, gosh, incredible. Yeah, that's really it's really important to recognise these I think they're seemingly little things, but they're profound. Our sound world and the world of being sensory.
How much we adjust to our environments. You know, like most people these days are born into this noisy urban environment. Artificial light
and
sources,
it becomes
noise
normalised,
sources,
doesn't it?
and even the smell of the air. I'd noticed that too after coming out of places like the Canning.
Yeah.
When you drive back into a big city, often you could smell and you go, what's that?
Yeah, I can understand. And Frank, you would have noticed that too, going from South Melbourne to Box Hill. There would have been sort of urban, urban smells and urban. There would have been a flavour in the air.
Huge differences, and I loved it. I loved the experience really. Once I got used to the quiet, it was just light years ahead, and it was semi-rural, as you say, and lots more birds. And that's why parks are. I mean, it's an obvious thing, but that's why parks are so vital to city areas, to have places where you can at least get that experience or something like it for a little while.
Yeah, that's it, for sure. Yeah, and you would have noticed a difference RF-wise too, moving out.
It was a shocker in South Melbourne.
Yeah, but it was.
We had this big arc welding place.
Oh no!
Oh, it was just impossible, except at night time.
Yes, I can imagine. Oh golly. Yeah, anyhow, it's good to get out and about and look in the snow. I imagine it would. I know. It's just you get this quiet, this absence of. It seems to be such an absorber of sound.
Yeah, it is. It does absorb, and yet it's interesting how much you can still hear in it. But it certainly does absorb sound a lot. And when it's actually snowing, I think more so. But if it's not. Unfortunately, a lot of the time when you get good snow, there tends to be a bit of wind around as well, blowing it in. But when you do get that very quiet, vertical snowfall, big flakes, the silence is incredible.
Yeah.
If you stop and you can't hear the snowflakes falling on you. Really, they're so light. It's almost an eerie silence because it coincides too with. Not quite, but quite closed out whiteouty conditions, so your visibility closes right in.
Yes.
Because of the clouds, and it's quite an experience. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
And it's such a pristine environment, the snow, the white, and it transforms the place. Like that area, that place that I'm familiar with, summer and winter. It still never ceases to amaze me when I go up there for the first time after the change of season. Let's say I've been there in summer, and I'll now go there and see it winter, and it's all white again, and then next come summer I go back up and it's green, and it's just such a change.
Yeah, no, I can well imagine. There's one spot up in the Bawbaws up near Mount St Guinea that for 1 year I took my kids up there camping, and every season at the same spot, so we could experience it in juxtapose the seasons, so we could just have that close contact. And in the winter one it was deep, it was over a metre of snow, and again it was that incredible, that eerie silence. And in other seasons they all had their own character. I remember the summer there was a lot of flies and sort of immediate noises, but I recall that one spot where we went back 4 times in close succession, and just to experience it that way. But look, being close to nature, I think is something that I think there's a very must be in our deeper regions of our DNA, or in our
it's where we've come from.
It is, and I think there's something that if we give it permission, it can be a very liberating experience. I certainly look forward to a time that I can spend extended times away again and doing that sort of stuff. And I know that Mr. Stew spends a lot of time away and on his own in very quiet and very remote places, and I think he finds incredible power in the solitude.
He certainly does.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be said for it. I'm feeling deeply nostalgic now in a different way. It's been good to talk about these things, and and the sort
Sounds like we need to listen to something like Verdi's The Four Seasons.
Yes, we do. We should have listened to something that's nature evoking. Well, it probably doesn't fit in with what I had in mind. I was going through some 78s, and I found a rare one, an old Okaya record here. Now, this record here, it says on the label, it's Harry Rademan's Jazz Orchestra. Now, this is early. It's about 1921. So the use of the word jazz is way back in about 1920, early 20s, was pretty sparing, and the term hadn't even was often written as JASS, and it referred to a more moderate form of syncopation than what we come to know. But this is an interesting one. This record's called Blues. So I reckon I'll put it on. Let's have a listen to it. And I'll just slap it on. And this is quite early on. And it's on an American Okaya disc. So, there we go. In the groove. This is vk3sl, and we'll just have a listen, a short interlude. Now, that record, what it says to me is Yiddish music. It's
the klezmer there.
It's klezmer. Now, that is so interesting because, for me, that connects the dots and really demonstrates how early jazz was fundamentally influenced by klezmer music.
That and the Scott Joplin type rag.
Yes, that type of syncopation.
All about syncopation.
Yeah, very much so. And but what a fascinating sort of document.
It certainly was.
And when I look at the label, Harry Raderman, sounds like a Jewish name.
Yeah.
And but his jazz orchestra, it says. So they're using the word quite overtly there. And so look, that's quite fascinating.
The clarinet was very, very klezmer, wasn't it?
It was, and it was riding above the in a third above the melodic line, as they do with that sort of what's the word? I can't think of it. You know what I mean? When the clarinet's just playing an obligato line, and that's something you associate quite strongly with trad jazz. And but look, interesting one. The other side of it is, here we go. It says George Geo Gershwin Swanee, Green Brothers Xylophone Orchestra.
We must play that.
I'll have to play this one. So we'll have. I have no idea what this is going to be like, but we'll slap it on and have a listen. VK3SL testing. And the music of George Gershwin, a very young George Gershwin, a record made about 1921, thereabouts. And it's an old Okaya disc. Okay, we're a subsidiary of Columbia, and Gershwin wrote that song, I think, in 1919.
One of his very early ones.
Yes, it certainly is, and so it's amazing to think that it was before Rhapsody in Blue and before Porgy and Bess, and a lot of his his well-known opuses were written after this time. So interesting to hear early Gershwin, and that was Green's Novelty Orchestra. So it's quite a find. I might put that in a special spot as well for future play. And we're just sort of testing things as we go here. This is vk3sl, and I'm talking with vk3jr and vk3op. I think both Franks are still there.
Yep, still here.
Yay. Now, I found a record from the Comedy Harmonicists, and it says, here we go, I was trying to think of a nature theme.
There's the Comedy Harmonists and the Comic Harmonists.
Oh, right, okay, so there's probably a parody group or something.
No, they changed the Comedian Harmonists.
Oh, okay. Comedian, okay. This one's called the Comedy Harmonists.
They were the main ones. I mean, and I think it was to do with, I don't know, they came to Australia. I think you've done a program on this.
Oh, I might have done too. I've just forgotten.
That's how I know about it.
There's Vine's, the Syncopators. Weintraub's Syncopators.
Yeah.
I did a program on them, and they came out to Australia from from the Weimar Republic, and sort of got trapped here, and that's a bit of a sad story actually.
The Comedy Harmonists, for some reason, when they came here, changed their name to the Comedian Harmonists, and not all of them came, I think.
I see. Maybe it was just to manage a different group, or a variety and lineup or something.
They're very, very good anyway.
Yeah, or German group, early 30s or late 20s. I'm not sure exactly the date on this one, but I was looking for a sort of a nature theme. And it says, when the sun says good night to the mountain. Well, it is the Comedy Harmonists. We'll see what they do with this song. And we'll give it a Guernsey. VK3SL.
When the sun says good night to the mountain, and the gold of the day meet the blue, in my dreams I'm alone on the mountain, with a heart that keeps calling for you. The voice in the trees, the song in the breeze, they bring memories of loving you. When the sun says good night to the mountain, I am dreaming, my sweetheart, of you. I dream of you, I dream of you, of you, of you. The voice, the song, the green memories of loving you. When the sun says good night to the mountain, I am dreaming, my sweetheart, of you. When the sun says good night to the mountain, and the gold of the day meet the blue, in my dreams I'm alone on the mountain, with a heart that keeps calling for you. The voice in the trees, the song in the breeze, they bring memories of loving you. I am dreaming, my sweetheart, of you. I am dreaming, my sweetheart, of you.
Impeccable diction there.
Yeah. Part of their shtick was to imitate the sound of instruments.
How about that? Yeah. Well, they're certainly, they've got beautifully matched voices, don't they? I wonder how many of them there were. I'll have to check in. I'll have to read up about them. I don't know much about them at all. I know that they did tour, and it's interesting to hear your comments about the change in name, so it warrants further investigation, I think.
I'll read it up tonight and report tomorrow.
Yeah, do that. I'll keep the record aside, and then we can play we'll save the other side up for next time. And there's quite a lot of German records here. Just found another one, this one I've never heard. It's Will's Accordion Meisterorchestra. So it's accordion, Akkordion, love it. And we've got two sides here. We've got
Stärker.
Yes,
Go get my Stein, a bottle of lager.
Yes, that's it. One side's Maskottchen.
Pilsner, wouldn't it?
Pilsner, you're right.
Yeah, Pilsner,
right,
definitely, absolutely. Now we've got Maskottchen Tanz Intermezzo, and the other side is Steckenspurd. So, and Foxtrot with 2 T's. Or 3 T's, actually. So what side, Frank, German Frank?
Oh, look, flip a coin.
Okay, I'll flip the record. No, I better not. No, we'll hear Steckenspurd. Let's hear this one. With Foxtrot with 3 T's. All right. Stand on by. This could be quite a ride. Oh, whoops. A little bit,
Back in the beer garden.
yes, indeed. Oh, whoops. Which fader? Yes, there we go. Yes, absolutely. Back into the beer garden. Yeah, and
very good beer. You get. I went to a place called the Hofbrauhaus,
oh yes,
which is in the city, and we were taken there by one of Kathy's German relatives who came to stay with us, a young boy of about 19, and he toured all around the East Coast and used our place as his base. He was with us for several months, but before he left he took us to this Hofbrauhaus, and for the first time I had German beer, and it was really nice.
oh, it's wonderful.
I think there are laws about, and you possibly know, Frank, laws about German beer having to be additive free.
Yeah, they are. They're very big into the whole cleanliness of their. And Bavaria's huge on the eco-regulation of industries, and so yeah, the product have to adhere to certain standards. So yeah, it is. There's another place in town if you like that. It's in South Bank. It's called the Brauhaus.
Oh yeah.
It's a German place, and they've actually got some good German beers on tap. I'm not a beer drinker, but one of the beers they had, and I was there with a group of work colleagues years ago for a function, and one of the guys ordered one, and they have Weiss beer, which literally translates to white beer.
Oh wow.
And I think it's a light wheat beer or something, and my brother in Bavaria drinks it a lot,
Yep.
and they had it on tap there, so I had to naturally take a photo and send it to him. Said, "Here you go, in Melbourne. So when you come over, here's your drinking hole."
Yes, that's the place to go.
Look, we'll certainly give that a try.
I'd like to give that a try.
We're hoping that some of the German people will come back and stay with us. They're delightful people,
Yeah.
and very interesting too. Anyway, I won't go into all that, but we certainly enjoyed the Hofbrauhaus, and I will try the place you mentioned. I'm not a great beer drinker myself, but it had a lovely clean sort of flavour, and I got through a couple of steins, I might tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. That
I think
sounds
it's
good.
designed like that too, that you can drink it in that quantity. Because what gets me is when I go over there is kind of the amount they drink, in terms of volume. It's like here, when people drink beer at a tavern or a beer garden or a pub, they generally have it by the glass, which is 200 or maybe a 285 or 300 ml. Over there, like a half-litre stein or that kind of size is a pretty standard, so I think, I'm not sure about the alcohol contents relative, but I did notice that.
Yeah.
And it was funny with my brother because he's big into the climbing in the Alps and stuff as well, and there was one trip over there where we were doing a lot of walking in the Bavarian Alpine region and the Austrian Alpine region, and we'd be walking along a trail, sidling up the side of a mountain heading up, and he'd start sniffing the air, and he'd turn around to me and whisper, "Weiss beer."
Oh, really?
And of course, thinking that he can smell it. The reality is he knew the trail so well. He knew there was a little guest house just around the corner on the trail, and so he pulled in, and there he was having his Weiss beer while we were having a break.
Oh, very good. Oh, that's delightful.
A man of discernment, obviously.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, his character.
Yeah. I remember in Prague they used to have a sort of a watering hole around the corner from where we stayed, and you used to be able to buy the beer by the jug and just bring your own jug, and they'd fill it up and you just take it home. So we'd just take a couple of jugs and they'd fill them up with beer, and it cost about 30 cents Australian for a jug of beer. And it was great beer. It was wonderful. But I think it had a lighter alcohol content, and it certainly didn't have that sort of sting that a lot of our local beers have. So different qualities there. But yeah,
I noticed the absence of the chemical flavour.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That sort of chemical sting. There's
I think that's the case, that they try to keep it. All of that stuff's kept to absolute minimum levels at traditional techniques and very clean source material and stuff. I think even just the level of like filtration they have to do to the water in the process and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's all very critical and highly regulated. Yeah, well, that sounds very encouraging. I've written down that. I'm going to next time I'm at South Bank.
Yeah, I'll look up the details and flick them through. So I'm pretty sure it's Brauhaus. Yeah, it's on the upper level.
Okay.
Right on the water there, overlooking Flinders Street Station. So it's on the other side, not on the ground, one level up, I think. And they've got a balcony area, and as well as inside. Yeah, you get sort of traditional food stuff there as well as other stuff. But they've got quite a few German beers on tap, and
sounds good.
Yeah, it was a pretty pleasant place to spend an afternoon or an evening.
Definitely. No, sounds most excellent.
Certainly would be.
Yeah. Well, we've got another one on the table. What have I got here? Baron von Getzky. And I've been playing a few of his on and off over a little while. It's another one. And I think it's called Gypsy Wine is the name of the song. Certainly fits that Palm Court genre. So are we ready? I think we are. Baron von Getzky and his Palm Court Orchestra, a recording made in the 1930s, and we're testing here on 160 and on UHF, and just mucking around really. There's nothing else to it. It's just a meander of sorts and sampling the collection and various things and having a good old chinwag, and it's made my day actually, fellas. It's been a bit of a crap day, stuck to the screen, and it's nice to be able to have a yarn.
You're getting far too much screen time.
Too much screen time, I know. It's a killer. It drains you of energy.
You need more green time.
Green time, not screen time. You're spot on. That's what we need. Yeah, anyhow, never the mind. I did go for a walk. I went for a 45-minute walk before, and but I need more. That record is... I'll just have to turn that off. Yeah, look, I've just pulled out the gramophone, the acoustic patch, the HMV Model 101 from 1927, because I noticed that Techmoan has done a special on them, which is quite intriguing. I look forward to... I haven't listened to it before, but I might play it shortly. But before doing so, I might play another acoustic record on an acoustic machine. So we can, now the spring's repaired on this unit. I think I've told the story before about this particular gramophone. It came from
Yes, turned up
my
in the
youth.
mail the other day.
Yes, it did. The spring turned up in the mail, and now it's all highly strung and ready to go. And I'm getting a funny sound here. Something's a bit weird. Not sure what's going on. Oh, I'll tend to that later. There's a bit of a rumble. It might be the fans. It's anyhow, it's okay. All right. Well, what I can do is I can just wind the machine. Whoops, sorry, mic bounced there. I'll just wind it up. Here we go. There's the sound of the gramophone being wound up, and the record I've chosen is German, of course. And here we go. Wound the machine up, and the record is it's the other side of that Polyphon record I played the other day. And this disc goes way back to the early days of the century, probably about 1908, thereabouts. Polyphon, I looked them up. The company made music boxes from the 1870s, and they sort of had a foray into gramophone records around the turn of the century. And that sort of arm of the company died fairly early on. But the records occasionally turn up, and here's one of them. So we'll hear the Polyphon Orchestra, which is probably recorded in Berlin, and around about 1908 or thereabouts. So we'll hear the Don Quixote March. It's M-A-R-S-C-H. I love it. And we'll put it on the machine, and we'll hear things in a very authentic fashion. We are playing an acoustic record on an acoustic gramophone through a non-acoustic microphone. And there we go. Whoops, right onto the label. And yes, the sounds of the Polyphon Orchestra, recorded about 120 years or 100 and something years ago. And the
Amazing.
Yeah, the Don Quixote March with sound effects. No doubt the story of Don Quixote is well and truly programmatically aligned to that that performance.
The Polyphon label must be very old because it kept on going a long time, didn't it?
Well, it turned into Polydor later.
Polydor, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yes, Polydor bought them out, I think before the First World War or around about that time. So I think the label that I see here was very short-lived and was just a subsidiary of the Polyphon music box company. That's from...
okay.
So, yeah, it's just one of those little sort of boutique labels, and occasionally the records turn up, and it's a nice little bit of nothingness. And
I'm still amazed at the lack of surface or relatively low surface noise.
Yeah, they come up very well, don't they?
Very well.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. They really knew what they were doing back then. And these HMV machines are just wonderful. They sound terrific. They've got a really good sound, these old 101s. And I was just listening here, and it's almost unbelievable. It's I'm just putting another needle in now because I feel like playing another one. And
you're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Well, yeah, I'll be on a roll for a little bit longer. Then I'll move over to Mr. Techmoan, who will talk about this very machine because I think he's done a program on it. Now, here we go. This is one here of a banjo solo by Fred Van Epps with orchestra on a very early Regal. Again, I think it's pre-First World War, so this goes way back. And we'll hear, it says here, the old man rag. I love it. The old man rag, two olds, and under it says the junk man. Well, I'll testify to the junk man. I don't think I'll admit to being very old because I think age is sort of a figment of the imagination. Yeah, let's have a listen to this recording. Oh, I better wind the gramophone up first. There we go. Needs a few winds. Typically, about 20 should do it. And we're just getting that spring tensioned up. I'll put it on. Let's let it get some momentum. It's always a good idea to let the turntable go while you're winding. There we go. I think that's pretty much it. Well, let's hear what happens. Yes, it appears that one wine doesn't quite get to the end of the record. Anyhow, there we have it. That's our nostalgia offering. It's an old Regal disc, the old man rag, and it says Junk Man, which intrigues me no end because that sort of has a rather personal resonance. There we go. The old doesn't though. Yeah, as I said, oldness. Age, figment of the imagination. Yes, stuff happens physically, but
it's all in the mind, as Mike Billigan said.
It's all in the mind, absolutely. No,
it's just a measure of how many times you've been around the sun.
Yes, that's right. Very well put. Yeah, and you've just sent me a picture of your lower machine, your father's machine there, Frank.
Yeah, I thought since you're playing German, that's the old...
Very nice. That's a beautiful looking radio.
Yeah, and it sits on a Metz cabinet which has the old turntable.
Oh, it does.
That white Bakelite.
Yes, I see it there.
Turntable, and it has a 1/4-inch tape thing that drives off the turntable as well.
Yes. I can see it's got a magic eye, and it's got a row of very nice looking front teeth. These sets are little buttons. They're like a row of teeth, aren't they?
Yeah, and a lot of them are, they're selecting different EQ curves, bands and stuff as well.
That's right. You've got bass, jazz, solo, orchestra.
Yeah, it's cool. It sounds. It does need some work, but it does function like it. So,
fantastic. Lovely.
It needs certainly the tuning mechanism needs a bit of restringing, for it to run.
Okay.
Yeah. That would have been a high-end product, I reckon, Frank, wouldn't it?
I think so. As the models of Vinetta, it harks back to the 50s. So it's a fairly large unit, but it sounds fabulous.
Yeah, because they used to have multiple speakers in the box, didn't they? I've seen
it does.
This.
It's got forward and side facing.
Yeah,
and it has that.
Right.
It's got one button you'll see there. It's got like what they call 3D sound, or it's like it's almost like a spatial effect of almost trying to do what stereo ends up doing.
Fantastic. Is it actually got some sort of delay in there to do that?
I'm not sure. It could have, but it does sound good. And in fact, one of the things I'm even thinking of doing just for general listening, I get it redone. I'm going to get a little FM modulator because it does that typical. It receives part of the FM band.
Yes.
And so I'll set up a media player with just a little FM transmitter in it nearby, so that if I want, I can just have that going with program material being played via its.
It's probably got a really wide IF for AM as well. It's probably got really nice.
It does. It does sound beautiful on AM. You just need to get a reasonable signal into it in terms of an antenna. But and that's what I first long ago. That's what I first started listening to amateur broadcasts on when I was young. I did that, and it had a second transistorized shortwave cassette player receiver, and I used to sit it on top, and then I'd literally use the solid state one as like a BFO, so I could decode SSB on it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I did something similar.
That's right, Frank. I've heard you describe a similar sort of arrangement using two sets. That's fantastic. I noticed it looks very, very official with all of the stations all lined up, and you've got all of the, all of the cities in Europe all there, all listed, all the Budapest and Frankfurt, and you know exactly where to turn the dial and what. It's brilliant work of art. Yeah.
Be well worth restoring, you think?
Oh yeah, very nice, very lovely looking sets.
Well, that's why, and I know where to take it to. I've got a contact to get it done properly, because it's I could probably do some of the electrical work, but with the restringing and a couple of tiny little cosmetic things. I think it's worth taking it somewhere to get it done properly.
Oh, I think so. To get the laminate sort of totally sorted out and get it really get the finish optimised. But it's in very good condition, really, and it'll come up really nicely. It'll be brilliant. And it's got does the magic eye work?
Yeah, it does. And that'll be the other thing too, because of the old German tubes, whether this contact's able to get a set of new tubes for it. I'm hoping that they're still available or equivalents.
Is it a hot chassis unit?
I don't know.
You've got to be a bit careful with these.
Yeah, circuit.
A lot of them.
There is a circuit inside it on the back, I think. When I opened up, just have a bit of a brief look around. I'm pretty sure there's a circuit in there.
Yeah. Some of them, if the knob falls off and you touch the shaft, you can get a zap. And,
Excellent.
so just be aware. But no, look, that's most impressive. It looks even at the top. You've even got the your EQ patterns and 3D, as you say, and a nice sort of Art Deco decal, and it's a work of art. They really did things well. They made things beautifully. I've seen Grundig's very similar, and I've seen Saba sets also very similar. And I never forget when we were living in Prague, there was a shop which was just full of these sets. And it was like a second-hand shop, and it was just wall-to-wall full of sets like this. And I was thinking, I'd love to get one, bring it back to Australia, but it was just not practical to do that.
Yeah, well, Dad, they bought this out he bought it out with him.
Wow,
So.
Amazing. Did he come back by ship? Or did?
Yeah,
wow.
They came out on the Castel Felice in 58.
Is that right?
They came out.
Oh,
I remember that name.
yeah, right. Interesting.
I think it was the old, might have been the White Star line, I think.
Yeah. Did he remember the voyage well? Did he talk about the voyage?
Oh, yeah, he wasn't fond. In fact, it was one of the great lines that whenever... Because he and Mum came out together, they weren't married, and they got married here in the internment camp up at Bonagilla.
Oh, really?
And so I think they first set foot in Australian Fremantle.
Yeah.
And then it was essentially station pier here, and then straight on the train and straight up to Bonagilla, as the setup used to be.
My gosh.
And they got married up there.
Did they? Yeah.
And his one line was always when, years later, when Mum would make spaghetti bolognese, he would just roll his eyes because, according to him, that's all they ever got fed on the boat.
Right, I can imagine.
You can never have too much spaghetti bol.
For Dad, you could. Like, he never grumbled. He did like it, but it was just this, I think, a bit of a bone of contention with him.
Yeah, had certain associations. I have to say, my family is
grew
glued
up with
to
a lot of spaghetti bolognese because my maternal grandfather, is Italian.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's brilliant. Wow. Well, there we go. Well, we'll look forward to some. You'll have to give us a continental Italian, provide some Italian flavour to the missions from your heritage.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Look, speaking of food, this is a very good segue. I've actually got to go. I'm being called.
Fair enough.
I'll bid you adieu.
Yeah,
and,
no worries.
Bye, Frank and Steve.
Yay.
I'll run the recorder over the rest of the missions, of course.
Okay. Well,
so keep well, both of you.
Yeah.
And this is VK3JR.
Yeah.
Clear.
Cheers, Frank. Thank you very much.
Frank, VK3JR, VK3OP. Have a pleasant evening.
Yeah.
And you.
Yeah, it's good to hear from you, Frank. Thank you very much. Yes, we'll look forward to hearing some Italian anecdotes. I look forward to that very much. That'll be great. Yes, and spag bog is what sort of glues my family together. Yeah.
I make it quite a bit, and my mum had a very good recipe, and I've worked it up a bit, so I do make it, and it's very rich, my sauce. It's probably not very traditional, but we like it.
That's all right, as long as it's it fits
plenty
the
of the appropriate red stuff in it, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean, and I think it's an absolutely obligatory. Definitely, and we went through the stage of making our own pasta. We got a pasta machine.
I've never really ventured down that track, but it's something I'd like to try.
It's worth it, but it's very messy.
Yeah, I bet.
And the time involved doesn't necessarily. You've got to weigh up the half a day it takes to go through the motions, and to particularly to clean up afterwards. I think is the.
It was funny with the whole cooking thing. When I was in high school, I remember for 1 year we had a subject called home economics.
Oh yes.
And we had to, part of it was cooking, and 1 week, and they'd always give you the recipe the week before.
Yeah.
And it was spaghetti bolognese. Okay, and because I was already cooking at home, having Mum taught me early, and plus growing up through scouting and all that sort of stuff, so I was well adept at. I could cook quite well. Yeah. And I looked at the recipe and I thought, this is missing a few things. So on that week we were in there, and because of course you weren't really allowed to, but I bought in a hip flask with red wine and a few things, and when the teacher wasn't watching, in it went, and then when she went around to try them all and tried them all, well, that's very nice. What's in it? Secret family ingredient. If I tell you, I have to kill you.
Fabulous. I love it. That's the way it should be. Yes, we all have to bring our own personal touch, and the younger the better. That's good. That's a great story, Frank. Thank you for that. All right. Well, what I'll do is I've got to go and do some reports, and I don't want to, but I got to.
Yeah.
So otherwise I'll be up all night.
Listen to some Tecmo, and I'll go back to building my interface.
Yes. What I will do, I'm going to keep it. I'll keep it going, but I'll play Mr. Techmoan's chat about the HMV 101, the machine we've just heard, and then I'll follow that on with another journey into space.
I'm enjoying them.
They're good, and a bit of BBC fare, and we'll hear what happens to Lenny and his delusions, and then I'll finish up. I'm going to do this each day now because I was saying to Wayne before that we had this silly family tradition where I had an old Bias 66 next to young William's bed for a long time, and I wound on a tape of the Operation Hurricane about that nuclear test. And it's got a fantastic soundtrack, and it's got Chester Wilmot giving his voice of authority from that World War II sort of vernacular, talking about the atomic test, and it's so serious and it's so foreboding and it's so terrifying, really. Anyhow, I used to put that on.
There's a great one too that's worth. I did hear it once. There's a great talk that. Now, what's his name? He's an Australian surveyor that did a lot of the surveying of all of the outback roads.
Oh, yes. That's
Len Bedell.
Yes, Mr. Bedell.
Yeah, there's a great recording of him somewhere. I think it might have been recorded at a Rotarians function or something.
Yep.
Because he surveyed all the bomb roads in and around Maralinga.
Yes, he did, and
he was there for the test and involved, and in fact had an involvement. And he tells a little story about it. Which is quite funny. I must chase it up.
It'd be good to hear. I'd like to. It's been an enduring missions topic. If Mr. Stew ever hears this, he'll testify because he goes to the Emu Plains quite regularly, and he knows all Len Bedell's books and the folklore associated. And so does Don. Don Bainbridge is he's really involved with the whole emu thing. I think he's writing a book on it.
Yeah, I was sort of through a work colleague that I did the canning trip with. He's very big too, well read on the subject matter, and actually he, with a group of people for a long time, was going out in the areas heading out from Maralinga. They were chasing the old rocket motors. Yeah, right. Many of which are still lying around all over the outback out there.
Yeah, I bet they
And they recovered quite a few.
Yeah.
And he was also chasing up data on Burke and Wills and some of their campsites and trying to chase up from old records and trying to equate those to modern maps and work out where certain sites were and all sorts of things. So
yeah, that'd be really interesting. It'd be interesting to follow on from that. I know at the Emu Plains they had a set of Mustang aircraft left there after the tests, and they were sort of put in line to see what the bomb would do to them, and I think they had about 6. And then in the early 70s or late 60s, 20 years later, or nearly 20 years later, a group went in and were able to piece one plane together out of the parts of the others and flew it out.
Wow.
And there's the story of that's up online as well. But they really got...
Obviously the electronics weren't too cooked.
They weren't too cooked, but they are known as the irradiated Mustangs because all of the remains of those aircraft were all taken out and used as parts in other Mustangs, and they all sort of had a particular heritage of being partly irradiated. But the story of it being flown out is just unbelievable after being in the desert for years and also having a nuclear blast do a bit of collateral along the way. Yeah, but great stories, outback stories. Well, look, we'll follow on. So at the end, we'll hear, as per usual, we'll hear the Operation Hurricane, just the last 10 minutes, including the big explosion, which is sort of fabricated because in reality you don't, you see the blast a long time before you hear it. But there's a countdown, and it used to be a family tradition at the countdown where someone would get the rap and get wrestled. Anyhow, it's a bit silly, really, but that's what happens here. So we'll play that at the very end, and if anyone happens to be in the kitchen, they might get the prod at the end. So there we go. That's the playlist for the next little while. Thank you, folks, and we'll continue now with.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening.
Yeah, and to you too. Thanks a lot, Frank. Always enjoyed your company, and along with other Frank and with JR Frank, and the stories about the outback inspire me no end. Yeah, and anyhow, here we go. Here is Mr. Techmoan saying, "Wind like gramophones, better than you don't remember." This is vk3sl testing.
Have you ever touched a stylus on a powered up record player and heard the sound it makes? That That's the sound of your ridges on your finger moving across the stylus and being amplified. Don't worry, it's a rubbish record player. This is a cardboard one I put together a few years ago. I've got a video about it if you're really interested, but trust me, I'm not damaging some priceless heirloom here. But anyway, that's the sound it makes when it's switched on. But of course, when it's switched off, it sounds like this. We know that electricity isn't the only way to amplify sound. It can be done acoustically, and it can be surprisingly effective. Although probably not with the microphone down there, but just take a look at this. That really sounded pretty similar to the electric amplification, but that was a steel needle on an acoustic gramophone. No electricity involved whatsoever. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. A record player from the acoustic era. This HMV 102. Let me give you a demo. When most people think of music being played through a wind-up gramophone, they'd probably associate it with a sound like we've just heard. Quite thin, harsh, metallic, a lot of crackles and pops, surface noise, not exactly hi-fi. But again, most people have formed that opinion, not from personal experience of hearing one live, but from seeing them in movies and TV shows, costume dramas set in the 1920s and 30s, when in those, if they did put a record on, yeah, it would have sounded like that. The reality is, of course, in a production they'll overdub the music, so they probably started off with a really nice sounding file and then put it on top and equalised it down, added a load of crackles and pops to make it sound like that. The truth of the matter is we may have been a little bit misled, because an acoustic wind-up gramophone like this can sound a heck of a lot better than that. Let me demonstrate with a different record on this same machine. It's also important to understand that the crackles and pops and a lot of the surface noise that we now associate with 78s, those things weren't there when these were new. Those have developed over time due to the materials aging. In different countries, they use different materials to make up the records. It's shellac, but it's mixed with a lot of different things. In the UK particularly, starting in the 1930s, just stuck a load of abrasives in there, things with sulphur, which have kind of broken down, created microscopic cracks and craters on the discs, and those are the things that you hear as crackles and pops getting picked up by the needle. But yeah, when these were new, they didn't sound anything like they sound now. Now let me tell you a bit about this particular machine. It's the HMV 102, a record player the manufacturers claim to be the world's finest portable. Of course, they would say that, wouldn't they? But the 102, that was a follow-up to the very similar 101. The 101 was on the market from 1926 to 1931, at which point the 102 replaced it. So just for fun, quick quiz, what year do you think they stopped making the 102 model? If you guessed 1958, congratulations. Yes, it's that 1958, the same year as the first transatlantic passenger jet service, the first integrated circuit, the first computer modem. And while all those other things were happening, the last model 102 wind-up gramophone was rolling off the production line. To see what year mine was made, I need to check the plaque that's located under the turntable. So here's how this code works. 102D is the model of the machine. B/10, well, the B serial range started in 1936. B1 would be 1937 and so on. So B10, that's 1946. The 13 means it was made at the Hayes Middlesex factory. The 8 is the signifier for mechanical gramophones that came out of there at that point, and 204 is the unit production number. The production of these machines had been on hold during the war and only resumed in April 1946, so this is the 204th model made after production resumed. You may have seen a video I made about the introduction of the 45 RPM and the 33 1/3 LP, the vinyl records that came out in 1949. The work on both those formats started before World War II, but of course was put on hold because of the war. But that resulted in the 78 RPM record remaining on the market for far longer than anyone had anticipated. In fact, my grandparents, who were born around about 1910, when they were in their teens and 20s, they were buying music on 78s. But my parents, when they were in their teens and 20s, they were also buying their music on 78s. But despite the delivery system remaining unchanged over that period, there was a lot of technological advances in the areas of playback and recording of the discs, not least of which was the introduction of electric recording. This is a famous picture from 1925. It shows the Victor studio in New Jersey set up for an acoustic recording session. This is how recordings have been done up to this point. It's basically the opposite process to acoustic playback. The sound goes into the cone and vibrates a stylus that cuts it into a disc. But here's the same studio a few days later set up for electric recording into a microphone. By 1926, this new electric recording technique was commonplace. Any studios that wanted to stay in business had either switched over to this or were switching over. It just so happened that 1926 was the same year the 101 gramophone was introduced, and in the catalogue for that model they took the time out to mention that despite that record player coming out at the same time as the new recording techniques, they wanted to assure everyone the new machine could also play your old acoustic records as well as these new electrically recorded ones. As the recordings on the records improved, the sound boxes on the record players were similarly re-engineered in order to keep up. For instance, using some of the range of HMV models of sound boxes as examples, the Exhibition and the number 2, the ones that preceded the electric era, those only had a frequency response of 150 Hz to 3000. But that jumps up significantly on the number 4 sound box, the first one for the electric era, the one that came along with the 101 record player. That could deliver a much wider 80 to 5000 Hz, but then we move on to the 5B, that's the one that's on my 102. This goes from 30 Hz to almost 10,000 Hz. That's another big improvement. A 102 gramophone fitted with a 5B sound box is really quite a desirable setup amongst collectors. But this leads me on to addressing a factoid, a bit of advice that's been relayed to me quite a few times, and it's not quite as clear-cut as the people who repeat it would have you believe. It goes like this: you're not supposed to, or you can't, play an electrically recorded disc like this on an acoustic gramophone like that. Now, from the information that I've given you so far in this video, you'll see there's a bit of a flaw in this already. I mean, just imagine somebody walks into a shop in 1946 when this was made. This is sat there on the counter, brand new, and it's up for sale. Hello, I wonder if you can help me, please. I want to buy a gramophone.
A what?
A gramophone.
A gramophone. Okay, Grandad. How about this one? An HMV 102.
Yeah, that looks good. So I can play all my records on this.
No.
What?
This is an acoustic player.
Right.
Well, that means it can only play acoustic records. And they stopped making those in 1926.
So you're telling me that you're selling a brand new record player that can only play records over 20 years old?
Well, I was hoping to sell it, but first I need to close the deal with a difficult customer.
But I wanted to play me Glenn Miller records at a picnic.
No chance, mate. It'll play Caruso, though.
I don't have any Caruso records.
That's a shame. They'd sound great on this.
Is this a wind-up?
Yes, it is. The handle's stored in the lid.
Sod this for a game of soldiers. I'm going back to the future. Yeah, of course, the idea that an acoustic record player can only play acoustic records is a nonsense. I've been exclusively playing electrically recorded records throughout this video. The soundbox on here, this orthophonic soundbox, orthophonics were designed specifically for playing back the enhanced electrically recorded records. So yeah, this thing's fine for records from the 30s and 40s. I think the message perhaps had good intentions, but has been a little bit muddled up and simplified over the years, because while it's fine for 30s and 40s records, 50s records, that's where things get a little bit more difficult. You see, it's not, again, down to the way the record was recorded, although 50s records tend to be a little bit louder and therefore you'd need to reduce the volume down a little bit, but it's more down to the materials that the records were made out of in the 1950s. The steel needles used on a gramophone like this were made to wear out after one play of a record. The hard shellac wears the needle down rather than the other way around. At the top here, you can see an unused needle, and at the bottom, that's one that's played a single record. But as electric pickups with their lighter tone arms, as well as turntables capable of playing all 3 speeds of disc, became common, the 78 RPM records started to be made out of a softer blend of materials in order to minimise wear on the newer and more delicate equipment. And therefore, if you play one of the newer, softer 78s with a steel needle gramophone, it does stand a good chance of causing excessive wear to the groove. And just look how much tracking force this arm puts down. That's around about 130 grams. Again, fine for the harder shellac records, but if you've got some precious discs, some later 78s, you probably don't want to play them on one of these. However, in a post-apocalyptic world without electricity, you could play them, and they'd probably sound fine, well, for the first couple of goes at least. Another issue, though, particularly noticeable with 40s and 50s discs, was that as time went on, records tended to be recorded louder, perhaps too loud in some cases for a machine like this, and there's no volume dial to reduce the level. You maybe heard of the origin of the phrase "stick a sock in it" being to do with reducing the volume of a gramophone by shoving a sock in the horn. Well, this design of speaker on this particular machine, that would be a bit awkward. You need quite a few socks. However, that's where the type of needles come in. You can alter the volume by swapping the needle. I've got 3 types here: medium tone, soft tone and extra soft tone. Now this isn't anything to do with the hardness of the metal, it's about the thickness of it. The thinner the needle, the quieter it is. If you can't picture how that would affect things, imagine the difference in volume between hitting an empty steel oil drum with a thin iron rod and then with a thick iron bar. The thicker one would of course be louder. And to show the difference between these 3 needles when playing the same track on this record player, the medium one averaged out at around 83 decibels, the soft tone at 78 decibels and the extra soft at 71. Now let me move on and show you a few more features of this particular machine. You might have spotted the auto stop that comes in at the end of the disc. I think that's a pretty cool feature to have on an old machine like this. I mean, you can buy new record players today that can't even do that. This one is switchable as well. You've also got auto start if you want it. The arm moves into 2 positions when you take it out of its holder. There's one for swapping the needle and then you move it further and that starts the rotation. All this is achieved with just an intricate series of levers. If you prefer to do things manual, you can apply a manual brake, and this is spring loaded and holds a pad against the inside edge of the turntable. There's a speed control, and yes, some of the samples in this video are no doubt being played a little bit quick. I haven't quite got used to it yet. Very fine movements of this control can make a big difference to the speed. Now, I bought this machine refurbished, so it runs incredibly smoothly. And I was surprised just how quiet it all is when it's spinning away. I mean, the whole thing is almost silent. You'll have seen the handy pop-out stylus tray at the beginning of the video, but also next to the storage for the crank at the back of the case, there's another clip that can hold a stylus tin. However, that one's really there to hold a tin of tongue-style needles. These were supposed to last for approximately 150 plays, but that long life came at the expense of wear on the discs, and nobody makes those kind of needles anymore. I'm missing one accessory from my set. That's a record holder. It was a tray that sat on top of the turntable when you had the case closed. It allowed you to carry around 12 to 14 discs. Now that would have added significantly to the already considerable weight. My plain black 102 is one of the less desirable models. The rarer coloured versions are the ones that collectors tend to go for. These pictures come from the website Grahamophones. This was a site created by Graham Barber, who was a collector and restorer of these things, who sadly passed away suddenly. The website is still being maintained, though, in his memory, and I think that is an excellent thing to do, as I've learned so much from reading through the articles on here, looking at Graham's videos. Hopefully, when I'm gone, these YouTube videos I make will carry on for people to see for years to come as well. I've got to say, listening to music on this machine, for me, has been quite a magical experience. The idea that you can play back a record with no electricity involved whatsoever, and yet the reproduction of it is really still quite impressive. Okay, yeah, it's not up to the standards of a modern-day record player, but the people who collect things like this and restore them, they've got modern day record players as well. This is a whole different area. This is an antique. This is a functional antique, and I think that's what interests me about it. I am left cold with things like old paintings and vases and things. Something like this, though, this is right up my street. I think I like old things that still do things and still do it as well as they did when they were new. Those are the things that really interest me. But I'm just an amateur passing through. I just picked up a couple of machines off eBay that were already restored. If you want to know more about this, you'll need to speak to the experts. I'm sure a few bits of information I've skirted over that I should have included, and things that I maybe said that weren't 100% accurate. So yeah, if you want to know more about it, I'm not your guy. I'd suggest going on forums. The Talking Machine forum is one that I found useful, but for me the most use was from an individual. There was a chap who signed up on Patreon. His name is G Hoon. I've got to thank him because he was asking me about these things. I said I got a couple, and we had an exchange of emails back and forth because I had loads of questions that I hadn't got the answers to. He helped me out. So without his help, I wouldn't have been able to put this video together. So yeah, sometimes you just need to speak to an expert, not just some rando guy on YouTube who's passing on a bit of information, probably half of it's wrong. Now, if you want to listen to a couple of these records being played in full, well, I had to skirt around the copyright still. These things are still in copyright, many of them, apart from, you know, sort of getting back to the early 1920s ones, which don't sound so good. So the better sounding ones I can't really play you normally in this video, but I've put a link in the video description to a playlist. There'll be a couple of records in there that you'll be able to hear being played back in full on this device. But I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this one here today, and that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
This is vk3sl. You've been listening to a Techmoan episode looking at the HMV 102 gramophone. And earlier on we were sampling the machine that I have here, which is a 101, which is very, very similar. Slightly earlier. My unit came from about 1927, I think. And I have the number 4 soundbox. He was profiling the 5B soundbox. My soundbox apparently goes from 30 Hz to 5,000 Hz. Pretty impressive for 1927. But I'm thrilled to have my machine back in working order because it's been languishing for a very long time. And only recently got a spring so I could bring it back to life. It was my 10-year-old birthday present. All right, well, what we'll do now is we'll refer to another episode of Journey into Space. So we'll find that here on the list. Haven't quite queued this one up, so you have to bear with me here. There's a bit of organising to do. We're looking for episode 3. If I can bring the microphone up to the screen, and let's see, episode 3. Episode 3, Journey into Space, Operation Lunar. I think this is the one. Episode 3 or 4. Whoops. I hope this is the right one. If it's not, I'm sorry. Anyhow, let's have a listen to Journey into Space. I'm vk3sl, test missions on 160 and UHF and streaming online. Just look me up on YT and all will be revealed.
Journey into Space. The BBC presents Jet Morgan in Operation Luna. After a thrilling trip lasting nearly 5 days, Jet Morgan and his crew in the rocket ship Luna touched down on the surface of the moon. After contacting the Earth and receiving messages of congratulations from all parts of the terrestrial globe, they set about their tasks of taking photographs, collecting specimens of moon rock and soil, and exploring the area in which they landed. Then, while Jet, Doc and Lemmy were making their way towards their next objective, the strange sounds which they, and particularly Lemmy, had heard on their journey from Earth were heard again. And then Doc thought he saw something move in the crater ahead of them.
Something move? Impossible. Did you see anything, Lemmy?
No, Jet. I wasn't looking. Whatever it was, I only caught a glimpse of it, but it was there, I swear it.
You two wait here. I'll go and look.
No,
Well,
Jet.
folks, I think we did play this yesterday. So I'm going to jump ahead to episode 4. I think that's the right place to be. Take 2.
Journey into Space. The BBC presents Jet Morgan in Operation Luna. Jet Morgan and his crew have been on the moon for 13 days. During that time, they've carried on their work of exploring the moon's surface and photographing the heavens. Twice since landing on the moon, strange sounds have been heard, and besides Doc seeing the image of a dome-like structure on the televiewer screen, Jet had the uncanny experience of slipping, as he thought, backwards and forwards in time. But during the last 6 days of their stay on the Earth satellite, nothing bothered them. And it was with light hearts and feelings of relief that the 4 men climbed into the ship for the last time and prepared to take off for the long journey back to Earth and home.
Televiewer, stern view, on.
All set?
I'll say. Yeah. Gyro,
Stand by for count-off.
we're going home.
But we'll be back. Firing in 15 seconds.
Piccadilly, here I come.
10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Contact!
Well, press it. Press the switch.
I did it. It didn't work.
What? Press it again.
Hey, Jet, the radio's cut. And the radar. Now the televiewer's going.
Listen. The gyro. It stopped. Everything stopped. There's not a thing in the ship that works.
Oh, the lights are still on. Oh, why can't I keep my big mouth shut? What's happened to the emergency lights?
They should have come on automatically.
Lemmy,
Yes, Jet?
the flashlight hanging behind you, can
Yeah?
you find it?
I think so.
Then switch it on. Hurry, switch it on.
Wait a minute, I haven't found it yet. Oh, yes, I've got it now. There. Thank goodness.
Better.
To have to lie in the dark as well would be the last straw.
Now, what's happened, Mitch?
Main power supply must have failed. We can thank our lucky stars it didn't happen while we were actually taking off.
Didn't you check the power pack?
Well, of course I did.
Well, we better get down the hole and check it again. Lemmy, get the tool pack out the locker, will you?
Yeah.
And Doc, go around to every control and switch it off. Break every circuit and keep it open until we get back.
Right.
Come on, Mitch. Open up the hatch and let's go down.
Well, Jeff?
Nothing wrong, so far as we can tell.
Oh, well, thank goodness for that. Shall I start switching on again?
Nothing wrong, but she doesn't work.
Eh?
She's as dead as a doornail.
Is that right, Mitch?
Yes, Doc. Beats me. I can't understand it at all.
Fault must be somewhere else. Up here in the cabin.
The main distributor board, maybe.
Maybe. We'd better look at that next. Now, while we're about it, you and Lemmy had better start checking the equipment you're responsible for.
Okay.
See if you can find any trouble there.
Sorry, Jet. Just like it was before. As far as I can tell, there's nothing wrong with the radio, radar, or televiewer. The lighting circuit is intact and all.
Doc?
Same in my department. Air conditioner and automatic oxygen supply are both packed in. Only the pressure indicators are working.
They should be. They're not on the circuit.
If the oxygen supply doesn't work, how do we breathe?
Oh, we can regulate it by hand.
Well, at least we won't suffocate.
No.
You checked the main fuses, didn't you, Lemmy?
Yes, Jet, all intact.
Well, gentlemen, until we trace the trouble, we're stuck. Stranded. We can't take off. We can't even go outside. The airlock doesn't work either.
Blimey.
What do we do now?
Well, we'll look again. Go over every inch of the ship with a fine tooth comb. Unless we find what's wrong and put it right, we'll be here for good.
Look, Jet, for nearly 48 hours we've been at it. We've got to take a rest.
How can we rest?
But we've taken some of the equipment to pieces a dozen times. At least let two of us sleep. Let's work out a shift system or something.
Oh, all right. You and Mitch. Lemmy and I'll carry on. We'll wake you up in 4 hours.
Let Lemmy sleep, Jet. I can keep going.
Oh, thanks. I can hardly keep my eyes open.
No, Mitch. One of us, either you or me, must be awake while the other sleeps.
Oh.
Well, if you say so.
Now, come on, Lemmy. Let's try the distributor board again. Well, if there is any traceable fault, it's eluded us. I don't think there's any point in going all over it again. We'll wear out the equipment just by constantly taking it to pieces.
And what do we do? Sit and twiddle our thumbs?
For a while, yes. A rest will do us all good. Give us time to think. Coming back fresh to the job might help solve it.
Well, in any case, we can't go on sweating our insides out. We've got to watch the oxygen supply.
How do you mean?
Well, it won't last forever. The more physical energy we use up, the quicker the store of oxygen goes down.
How much oxygen have we got?
Oh, at a guess, I'd say enough for 15 more days.
Is that all?
Well, it seemed enough when we left home. We didn't expect to spend extra time here.
Well, that means unless we take off within 10 days, we won't have enough left to last the journey back to Earth. And how about food?
Well, normal rations would last about as long as the oxygen, but both can be eked out over a slightly longer period, if we're careful.
Then we'll be careful. Doc, I'll make it your responsibility to ration both the food and the oxygen.
Uh-huh.
We'll organize periodic checks of the ship's installations. Now, one flashlight will remain on the control table, but it'll be turned on only when necessary for the checks, and for Doc to write his diary.
Huh?
Doc's diary? Is that so important that we have to waste valuable light on it?
One flashlight lasts quite a time, Mitch. Besides, now the recorder's out of action, Doc's notes will have to serve as the log. Now, onto your bunks and let's get the rotor worked out for a start.
We were all so pleased, laughing and joking because we was going home.
Get onto your bunk, Lemmy, and save your breath.
November 12th, 1965. It is now 23 days since takeoff from Earth, 19 days since we landed on the moon's surface, and 5 days since we tried to get off again. By now, everybody, including Mitch, has resigned himself to waiting and hoping. Every few hours, the radio, radar, televiewer, and other installations are switched on in the hope that power has returned to the ship. So far, the result has been negative. The rest of the time, except for whose ever turn it is to regulate the oxygen supply or distribute the rations, we spend lying on our bunks. The only illumination is the one flash lamp which burns over the control table. It doesn't throw much light around the cabin, most of which is in deep shadow. Only the blank, expressionless faces of the dials and gauges staring dimly at us from the darkness that is the wall. The dull gleam of the metal that goes to make up the concave roof reflects what light reaches it, enabling us to make out very faintly the door that leads to the little pilot's cabin in the ship's nose. The cabin which Jet would have entered to pilot the ship through the Earth's atmosphere on the return journey. If we could open that door now and slide back the shutters that cover the airtight window, we could see the surface of the moon, bathed in the pale, reflected Earthlight. Perhaps even see the Earth itself. But, as with the hatch and the airlock, we have no power to open that door, so it remains shut, immovable. The time drags. Talking would make it slow.